or we'll just go ahead and get started. Hey, good morning, Dallas Startup Week. My name's Kevin Lantroop. I'm the Vice President of Defense here at Capital Factory. I've decided today to lead this discussion from the main stage at our Austin location, which is the Center for Defense Innovation, or I should say our main stage at the Center for Defense Innovation in our Austin location. And I'm really excited to bring this topic to you with a couple of gentlemen that I've known for a long time, Cliff Colbert and Brants Hoodzeets. And we're going to talk about innovating the DoD. Specifically, we're going to talk about how the DoD integrates into innovation ecosystems and leverages those ecosystems, which I think has been a pretty cool experiment for what's been happening, particularly here in Texas, with all the different the defense innovation DoD X's coming together with startup ecosystems, and it's been really exciting to watch. I'm really happy to be able to introduce these two speakers. So we're going to start with Cliff Colbert. So as a commercial engagement executive at the Defense Innovation Unit, Cliff is focused on building relationships and awareness with the National Defense Innovation Base, specifically in Texas. And DIU focuses across 5 areas: cyber, artificial intelligence and machine learning, autonomy, human systems, and space. Cliff splits his DIU time with JP Morgan full-time as a commercial banker focused on delivering solutions for companies participating in the innovation economy. Cliff holds a Bachelor of Science degree in quantitative economics. That sounds really hard. From one of the 5 best service academies in the country, the one that's in Annapolis, the United States Naval Academy. And a Master's of Science from SMU. Cliff, just giving you a little rib there. As a West Point grad, I just got to say, beat Navy. Cliff, why don't you give some quick opening comments?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And appreciate the candor there from the slightly north river there on the Hudson. Happy to be here with everybody today and elaborate a little bit on what DIU is focusing on both throughout the rest of this fiscal year and into the next, and excited to hear some questions from the audience, and then also hopefully provide some clarity on how people can participate as efficiently as possible in the ecosystem. So thanks for having me, Kevin.
Awesome. And so next, Brants. I've known Brants for a couple of years as well. Brants is a tech geek and a connector. In the past, Brants has been in labs creating navigation and sensor platforms for UAVs, simulating black hole phenomena, and using particle accelerators to bombard silicon wafers. That all sounds also really, really hard. He spent the last 5 years building communities of deep tech entrepreneurs. A significant part of that time was spent right here at Capital Factory, and Brants and I used to collaborate a lot right here on this floor where I'm standing right now. So Brants is currently helping the Army solve some of the toughest challenges by sourcing promising technologies on behalf of the Army Applications Lab's corporate ventures team. His active areas of interest include artificial intelligence, autonomous robotics, cybersecurity, and the intersection of technology and art. So Brants, please, if you would, make a couple of opening comments.
Kevin, thanks so much for hosting this, and for everybody at Dallas Startup Week tuning in. Thank you guys for waking up early, although probably not early for the defense world. Pleased to join you guys this morning, and hope to share a little bit of my insight today with being someone who has some experience in the innovation ecosystem, but relatively new to the defense world. So maybe given that point of view of kind of straddling both worlds here, and hopefully we can answer some questions and share how startups and early stage companies can get plugged into the defense innovation ecosystem.
Thanks, Brent. And the intersection of technology and art is getting some good response in the comments. I like that one as well. So like I said, my name's Kevin Lantroop. I'm the VP of Defense here at Capital Factory. I graduated from West Point, spent some time as an operator in the Army. Then I went to law school at the University of Texas, spent some time practicing law in the military. For the last almost 3 years, I've been helping early stage companies and startups understand all of these DoD X organizations in a few ways. How does their technology help solve the mission? I call that product mission fit. What are these various programs? How do they differ from each other? Which ones are right for the companies? And how can they access? How can they go out and win a contract? and building the defense innovation ecosystem specifically here, anchored in Austin, but all across Texas. And Dallas is definitely a place where we want to bring that. And so going to ecosystem, that's going to take us into our first kind of topic of discussion or question. Startup ecosystems really consist of a couple of key components. You got to have density of startups. You got to have enough of them that they can, collaborate with each other and they can draw in the other things that the ecosystem needs to really thrive. One of those things being venture capital. Obviously, if you don't have investors coming in, the startups are not going to grow and they're not going to succeed. You've got to have academic pipelines, and that's kind of two things, like the R&D coming out of universities, but also the students, the engineers and the developers that are coming out and that are ready to, young and hungry and ready to join a startup. You got to have big customers, and that's where like the Fortune 500s and the Fortune 1000s that we have a ton of in Dallas become super relevant. And then you got to have connectivity, and it's organizations like, quite frankly, like what we're doing at Capital Factory in Austin, but also in Dallas and Houston as a place to provide that connectivity. And so my first question in that regards is for Cliff, which is I'd like for you to talk about, the Dallas ecosystem specifically, since Brent and I actually currently are sitting in Austin and you're actually in Dallas. And talk about how it touches those above elements, and particularly how the defense is kind of benefiting from that.
Yeah, for sure, and thank you for that. The Dallas ecosystem is extremely robust in a couple of different ways. Both from I would describe the ecosystem almost as a barbell type of system where you have a lot of heavy B2B corporate, 50 really type of solution providers that exist in Dallas with a heavy focus on telecom and software. Some of those the venture capital early stage companies that are looking to participate in the ecosystem through academia and research and development efforts that also exist in Dallas. And so I think you hit on something really important, is the connectivity of how do we bridge the gap between the two? How do we get the most capable technology applied to the best possible use cases in the most relevant time period as possible? And I think that opportunity exists in Dallas for a couple reasons. One, the problem set definers are here, right? So you have, Fort Hood, not too far down the road. You have use cases for B2B applications, whether it's with telecom with AT&T and Verizon, whether it's with the primes with Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, BAE, all have a presence here. And then, and so I think it's on, the X type of organizations that are trying to connect the, R&D development people in that ecosystem. And so in-case is really to, position Dallas to leverage all those different resources in a way that everybody is incentivized to make sure the technology gets to the people actually putting their lives on the line for our freedom that are forward. And so I'm excited about what's going on in Dallas. I'm excited about the different components that exist in Dallas to help ultimately enhance the people that are forward in the defense department that are in need of that technology versus our adversaries. And so I'm excited where we've been and where we're going.
That's fantastic. So obviously, a lot of what's been happening in the Defense Department, or in the Defense Innovation space, the DoDX space, really a lot of it was focused here in Austin, kind of started here in Austin with the DIU cell here in Austin, with AFWERX coming in next, Army Applications Lab and Army Futures Command obviously following after that. But from my perspective, I always believed that DFW and the Metroplex was really a place that could take that, kind of model where they're connecting to earlier stage innovators and trying to bring in venture capital and all that thing, could really take it to the next level because of those big companies that you mentioned, because of Raytheon, because of Lockheed, because of Bell Flight, because of GE Aviation up there, because of a bunch of others that are up there. AVX, I believe, is up there. AVX was one of the three semifinalists for the Future Attack Reconnaissance Aircraft under Army Futures Command. So that's that component, quite frankly, of that industry support just doesn't exist here in Austin. And so I think that's super important. So how how are the DoDX organizations? And it appears that we lost Brance. Oh, Brance is back. Brance is back just in time for me to put you on the spot, my friend. So,
Perfect. My spidey sense was tingling, guys.
yeah. So Cliff was just talking about, kind of the flavor of the innovation ecosystem up in Dallas. But the one thing that really is your area of expertise, Brance, is the connectivity. The connectivity, I believe, and I don't think I'm alone in that sense, is super key. You can't just have all those things, but they have to be able to find each other and plug into each other and synergize off of each other. So I'd like for you to talk about your experience with respect to that. How important is it?
Yeah. Sorry, and my apologies that it's causing me a little bit of issues here. So talking a little bit about the connective tissue between the different startup innovation ecosystems and the defense innovation ecosystems. I can't stress the importance of communication there and translation. Really, I think that's been one of the biggest challenges stepping in from one world into the other is just learning how to communicate on both sides, right? And probably no surprise here, but the Army and DoD organizations have a lingo of their own, right? A vernacular of their own. And so being able to communicate what the Army, at least for AAL, what the Army is trying to get after, the problems that we're actually trying to solve, how that actually translates into problems that industry is solving. And really that's imperative for actually getting productive outcomes, right? So if the goal is to work with small innovative companies, you have to be able to communicate the problems appropriately. And to do that, you really need to have that connective tissue of the ecosystems, right? So having somebody at Capital Factory or the DEC or different organizations across the country and being able to call them and say, hey, you might see this solicitation from us that came out. Here's really what it means, right? Here's really the technologies that we're trying to solve. And sometimes it's not easy. I've been with Army Applications Lab for only a few months now, and already sometimes I fall into the habit of using Army lingo, right? I'm talking about transitioning technology, increasing the rate of fire, and my friends from the startup side are like, what the heck are you talking about, right? Like, give it to me really, like really, what are you talking about? Like, oh, robotics. Okay, that's what you're trying to do here. And so kind of, again, stressing that importance of having that good connective tissue and that network of people who can bit by bit translate the needs into what works for their audiences is really important. So hopefully that gets after some of the question you're asking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, what you just said is super important. So you have, kind of the central theme or thesis of DIU, which we'll get to in a little bit, is this concept of dual use, right? Where you've got companies working on commercial solutions that also are going to have applicability on the military side. But one, they have to understand what each other are working on or what they need, where the intersections are. But the main thing is really that connectivity with the user who has the problem and understanding what their pain point is. And speaking of pain point, right here on this floor where I'm standing, was one of the first times the Army Applications Lab did that, Brance. And I think you were probably here for it, where we had a young soldier from Fort Sill, or maybe he came up from Fort Hood, showing this is how I take an artillery round from the place where it sits in the rack of a truck to the place where it needs to go, so that it can be shoved into the breech of an M109A6 Paladin. And that just that visualization of that problem is so super important. And without the connectivity to have that shared knowledge, you're never going to get there. So the next question I have kind of on this ecosystem thing is kind of a two-way question, which is for the DoDX organizations, for DIU and Army Applications Lab, what are you guys kind of bringing to this ecosystem that wasn't here before, and what are you taking out of it that's really helping you all do what you need to do to help the DoD innovate faster?
Yeah, I think from the DIU perspective, we're focused on delivering projects at scale, right? And so I think when you think about a DIU solicitation, it's really something that's going to affect multiple services in a way that they're going to need either a viable company that is looking to expand into the department, or it's going to have to partner up with somebody who can actually scale. And so I think some of our most successful projects have either attracted viable commercial companies, to your point, with dual use technology that can be applied to department problems at scale, or we leverage our prime partnerships to help new technology reach scale to the end user. And so I think I always like to use the example, a startup's not going to start rolling off F-35s tomorrow, right? And that's not the goal either, is to replace the Lockheed Martin, right? It's what's best for the end user, defined by the end user, and within their own risk tolerance too. I think that's something that we don't necessarily talk about a lot, but I think back to an event that we held at Capital Factory a couple of years ago with a company called Uptake, and really, this paradigm of when somebody is in charge of somebody else putting their life at risk, what is your risk tolerance for innovation and technology? And is it easier to just replace a piece of equipment with something brand new, or actually, try to find an innovative way to solve the problem? And that's something that's ever changing and ever fluid amongst the different services and different problem sets. But that's something to always keep in mind, I think. Back to Brance's point is, and your point as well, Kevin, is, as the end users define the problem set, how are they graded on that problem set, and what is their risk tolerance once you deliver that problem set? And I think that's what we're all continuously reiterating and getting better at.
Awesome. Brance, anything to add? I mean, so you,
Brance,
yeah, Brance, we lost you again. We lost your speaker again.
Totally. Sorry. Audio's back. Yeah. To add on there, I think I think AAL is still in its early stages, right? And so I think we're still heavily absorbing from the ecosystem, right? And we're trying to learn from the ecosystem how to be a better partner. So I think that we're taking a lot of lessons learned from the other defense innovation organizations into our own playbook, and really making it easier for businesses to work with the Army here. As far as things that we're providing back to the ecosystem, I think maybe a good example here is the FAR program that the soldier touch points that we provide, right? So non-military guy here, I don't have the experience of loading a cannon or seeing it fire. And so when we start working with companies or their companies that we would like to work with, being able to get you in touch with soldiers or take you out to the field and show you this process in action, that's really the only way that true innovation, I think, is going to happen. If you watch or you read about a problem, you might get the impression of what's actually happening, but it's going to be really hard to really get to the good stuff, the nuggets of goodness that can be innovated on. So by providing that access to the actual problems, I mean, it's very self-serving, right? Like, that's how we're going to solve our problems. But really, it's giving more opportunities to innovators who never would have thought about the military as a customer, and actually giving them a fair chance at knowing the problem and solving the problem, and then getting money from that, right? And so that's stuff that we're doubling down on with future problems, kind of packaging the opportunities in these cohort programs that bring together non-military innovators with folks who know the problem from the military side, and as well who can kind of help companies navigate the bureaucracy, right? There's to jump through to work with government, and so trying to make that process easier. If not make it easier, at least explain it better so people know what they actually need to do, what websites they have to go click on and register for. So I think we're still in kind of that lubricating phase of making the whole process a little bit more seamless and smoother and easy for industry.
Yeah, and so to that point, I want to say a couple things. One, for the folks that are listening, if you have any questions for Brant or Cliff, please just go ahead and throw them up in the chat, and we'll address them as we go through. And I'll make sure that we leave time for questions if there are any. For a second thing, like there's actually a comment in there, like I'm here because I want to know how to get through this proposal process for my company. So for those in the Dallas ecosystem and up in the DFW ecosystem, Victor Fishman's actually a really good resource for that. He has been kind of driving an effort to connect the DFW ecosystem with some of these DoDX organizations, with people like me and organizations like Capital Factory, to help companies in Dallas who need to understand how that stuff works do it. And so on that vein, like at the end of the day, these small companies that are going to engage with the DoD, there's probably a mission component to it, but there's also a big financial component. Like the DoD is going to give me some money. They're not going to take any of my equity. I can take that money and build a product, or I can adapt a product to a new marketplace. Things that I would normally spend like Series A or B funding on. And so that's super attractive. And so I want to throw this one at Cliff. You know, you work in the financial industry, but you also understand the DIU model, which is, which was the pioneer in kind of treating those early rounds of prototype funding as non-dilutive investment, essentially. So I'm interested in your take on how those two types of funding work together. And how, like, if I'm a startup, how should I be looking at kind of pairing, DoD prototype funding with venture capital?
Yeah, for sure. And I think when I think about the alternatives to venture capital, it's really kind of, a couple things. There's no substitute for revenue, even when you're raising venture capital. But I think a lot of what happens in the DoDX organizations is grants, right? And so to the extent that you can partner a grant with additional revenue is a very powerful tool to expand your business. And when I think of phase 2 of a SBIR process where there's an equity matching component, that allows you to go back out to market and say, hey, I've done two things. I can generate revenue because I got phase 1 contract. And 2, I have a customer that we can address this problem with. And that leaves an end state for you to provide equity into there. And so I think, when you think about the exit opportunities for people that are providing equity, especially venture capital, and how they're thinking about, what the next iteration of their investments and the funds need to be, I think there's some room for improvement there across the industry, and really on us to, help articulate that story a little bit better. But I think for one, the grant process and generating that revenue and I know that's, I'm saying that kind of lightly because that requires actually getting the contract and navigating the system and, potentially going to a pitch day and beating out some sort of competition to get that funding. But I think that's all part of the process that needs to be done because that's the way that, we're going to pick a solution for the end customer.
So, and now back over to Brant's. So Brant's, when you were with Capital Factory and some of the things that you've done before, you interact with lots of companies that are trying to raise, their seed A or B round. That's one of the primary reasons why companies engage in ecosystem like this. And now I'm guessing over the last few months sitting on the other side, you've also had some of those same conversations with companies that are trying to get, DoD funding. How are those conversations different? Like, what are the, and how are they similar? I guess would be an interesting perspective.
Yeah. So I guess one of the things that I think about straddling the line from the ecosystem side and now from the defense side is looking at what does the source of money get you, right? And what path does it set you on, right? So when you raise venture capital, your investors are they're paying for a timeline, right? And they're paying for goals that are hopefully gonna be hit on that timeline. And same thing with grant funding or SBIR funding from the military, specific timeline. And so I think just understanding the longer term horizons that money sets you on is important for companies to understand, right? And so if you see grant funding from a defense organization, well, it's not just no strings attached money, right? Like there is something that we're hoping to get out of that. And so what is that? How does that one opportunity factor into your overall strategy? You know, your overall company strategy, and then your overall strategy, right? And so if it just looks like a shiny balloon opportunity, and you're going after it, well, that could play well with your overall strategy, or it could not, right? And so I think that would be something that I'd recommend for companies, is just looking at it with a longer term picture of, are you actually focusing your company to try and solve defense problems? Are you trying to split your business so that you're still commercializing and doing defense at the same time? Does your company have bandwidth to do that? Because I think sometimes it can be a little like, well, we can just hop back from one to the other, and that isn't the most effective route. I see a lot of in general in the defense ecosystem. I see a lot of cyber funding opportunities. I know vehicles that are being looked at. See as all these DoDX organizations are gaining experience for longer periods of time, how those funding vehicles will mature, and how industry reacts to that, right? I think just the proof is in the pudding, really, of seeing how companies can most effectively leverage the different funding opportunities out there.
Yeah, Brant, that is a really excellent point, and one that I make with companies in meetings over and over and over again, which is these innovation programs, SBI, our open topic with the Air Force, challenges that you guys are doing. They're exciting, they're interesting, and a lot of people will see these things and say, hey, my technology does X or Y or Z. I know that can solve a problem for the Army, for the Air Force, for whomever, and that very well may be true. But if that customer and that product and that market doesn't align with your vision for how to grow that company, particularly if you're venture backed, I mean, you've got investors, you're looking for some kind of a liquidity event down the road, most likely. Otherwise, you wouldn't be taking on venture capital. And so if that pathway doesn't align with how you see the business growing, beyond, C stage, then you shouldn't be doing it. And the companies that I've seen that have done it the most effectively, and there's a really great guide out there that's going to be published in a few days. A gentleman by the name of Jeff Erasm, who's going to be on our AMA that we do, our monthly AMA next month. But it describes this really well, and it's consistent with what I've seen. The companies that have done the best are the companies that have a very clear product roadmap, and they can articulate a DoD use case that's almost directly aligned, so that they can take that prototyping money, build a product that the DoD wants, and then go and adapt that product to the use case that they wanted to go after anyway, which is their commercial or their mission-driven use case. And like I'm thinking of like Icon as a great example of a company like that. Icon 3D, they 3D print houses with a giant robot called a Vulcan. They want, they're a mission-driven company that wants to alleviate homelessness, that wants to drive down the prices of housing in urban and high rent and high price areas, and they want to help respond to like natural disasters. And one way to do that is by having a fully autonomous Vulcan that prints houses in like a place that's been struck by a hurricane. And guess what? Like with the help of the DIU and the Texas Military Department and AFWERX StratFi and a couple of other partners and NASA, like they've gotten funded to go out and build that fully autonomous robot, which is really cool. And there's other examples like that, but it's the alignment of the company's product strategy with the DoD use case that they can articulate. And so moving into that, so like I just said, StratFi, we were talking about matching funds with Cliff. So Dr. Roper yesterday did a webinar, his first AMA since they kind of did AFWERX 2.0, and talked about some of the new strategies that they've got, which are really just kind of a repackaging of some of the old strategies for taking customer signal demand that's funded, as well as investor and market demand that's funded, and using that to pick where they're going to make additional medium-sized and large-sized investments in companies. And this is cyber season is upon us. It's we're in pre-announcement for 20.3 and 20.5. So Brant, I'd like to go back to you again. I've seen AAL over the last year and a half probably start to use SBIR funding in a new way. So tell us about what's new for you guys and how that's evolved.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I'll preface this with a disclaimer that SBIR funding is just one tool in the bag, right? And I think it's used pervasively or prevalently in the DoD innovation space, but it still is just one tool that DoD organizations have to fund innovation and fund companies. So I think at least for AEL, as we sharpen our skill set and continue to evolve as an organization, you'll see different funding opportunities coming from us. And so as a company, minutely educating yourself on the different funding vehicles can help you suss out which opportunity to be the best for your company. So one of the new things that we've launched is a program called Spartan, which is a joint effort between Army SBIR and ASALT. And the importance there for folks who maybe aren't as nuanced on the defense side is that Army SBIR is bringing this R&D funding, right? So that's funding for small businesses to help develop your technology for. ASALT is the organization within the Army who purchases things, right? And so what we're trying to do is leverage this SBIR. Can be very beneficial and very useful for small businesses for a number of reasons, but is really focused on that R&D. We're trying to pair that with a pathway to actually selling to the Army long term. Obviously, if you're a small company and you do a SBIR program with the Army, and then you never can actually go that next step and develop the product and sell it, it's kind of like a science fair project that sits on a shelf, right? And so that's partly what we're trying to get after here, is making sure that we're being a good partner to industry here, and that when we give you, it's providing the next opportunity for you on the horizon, and really it's providing the next solution for us, right? So it doesn't do us any good if we get this cool technology that just sits in the concept stage. We really want to be able to take that concept that companies develop and turn that into a fully fledged product somewhere down the road that helps our soldiers. So the first problem that we're tackling here is helping increasing the rate of fire for self-propelled howitzers. So basically cannons and the soldiers who have to load these 100-pound shells into the cannons, helping them do that faster, right? So I don't think I could do that all day. I'm surprised that soldiers do. Their backs and their knees. Robotic solutions that can help solve that. And for anybody who's interested, I'll put the link in the chat where you can learn more.
Brant, they do wear out their knees and their backs. There's a reason why the vast majority of soldiers who make it through a 20-year career get a VA disability rating of like 70% or higher, because that stuff's hard. So, one thing that I think that the Army is doing completely differently from, and so let me touch a couple of the comments. So Victor, if you're here, there's some folks that want to connect with you. So if you want to throw your email address up there so folks can reach out to what you're doing in Dallas. For Kimberly's question, I threw, it's a little hard in this particular environment for me to go digging around on my computer and throw links and documents in there. But if you Google Jeff Erasm, SBIR Guide for Investors, SBIR Guide for Startups, you'll find it pretty easily. If you have a specific, I have some familiarity with Agility. If you have some specific questions around that program, understanding that none of us are affiliated with that program, but we have some general knowledge, I'm happy to take a crack at it. And let me go on now to kind of the evolution of Brant's comments. So one of the things that AAL has done that's completely different from the model that the Air Force is using, the Air Force is creating a marketplace through a bunch of small awards, right, where you can go shop for technology. The Army's being very deliberate about making sure everything they do is tied to a system, a prioritized problem with a customer and a program and all of those things. And that is really, really similar, in my opinion, to kind of how DIU does it. So Cliff, I know you guys don't use SBIR, but if you can give a little, just a quick overview of how the DIU's model for prototyping and procurement matches up with that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we use the CSO process, so commercial solution offering is one thing that is a tool that we use in our toolkit to connect hopefully funded projects on the back end to R&D on the front end, and so that's what we're hyper focused on. And to your point, and then also adding to being able to other companies together through the CSO process is really something we're also focused on as well. So yeah, we think a DIU commercial solution offering. It's we try to close those windows within 60 days. So we try to provide that funding cycle to the awarded company within the 60-day period. But I think what I like to also reiterate to startups is, that is because that problem exists today and it's funded today, and if the end customer could solve that yesterday, they would. And so it's a race to get that technology into the hands as fast as possible because it's already been defined. And we found that process to be a lot more productive rather than trying to sell new technology into the department, because you need somebody to own it at some point. And so I think our partners down in Army Futures Command and the lab there are also focused on that, because I think that's the most efficient demand signal we can give the ecosystem, is to actually fund it, have an end customer to own it once it goes into production.
Yeah, and that's the hard thing is, it's easy to shove a bunch of stuff into the funnel and it creates a marketplace and it has a ton of utility. It's less easy but doable to, identify problems with laser focus and then kind of back out the technology. One of them's really scalable, one of them's really not. So the challenge for all of us is to figure out the model that is scalable and repeatable so we can solve, all 31 of the Army's, priority signature systems and the problems associated with those at once. So there's a question in there about, like, how is an auto loader that bolts onto the back of a Paladin a dual use product? And the reality of it is that that's not a dual use product, right? However, and I'll give Brantz a crack at, providing his perspective, but one of the things I really love about what you demonstrated with the FAR cohort and what I can only assume will be a similar type of demonstration through Spartan is that you're integrating a bunch of different dual use technologies. So a company that does inventory management using machine vision was also incorporated into the FAR to count rounds and to identify types of rounds and things like that. A company that makes a really commercially applicable robotic arm that would be great in like an Amazon warehouse to do automated package, selection and sorting and delivery and whatnot, like, is going to help pick up that round and carry it and manipulate it for you guys as part of that product. So these dual use commercial technologies are being integrated into a very, very non-dual use solution with respect to that. So that's my perspective, Brantz. Tell me if I'm off. Brantz, do you have a perspective on that question? I think Brantz is no, he's not frozen.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the cue in there. Yeah, absolutely echoing the component technologies piece, right? So to your point on we're not really expecting a small company, a small business to be making an auto loader for a Canon for the commercial sector, right? Like, that's not at all what we expect. But what we do hope to find is component technologies, and you mentioned inventory management using computer vision as an example. Like, that's absolutely a technology, kind of a component technology that does have a place in the commercial sector, right? And so if companies can leverage their experience, maybe doing inventory management for grocery stores or something like that, and say, well, it's the same problem, but we're just doing this with artillery shells instead of Kellogg's boxes. That's what we're trying to get at. And then when you package those all together and you have a company bringing inventory management and some robotic arm solutions, digital twin and understanding the physical space that's within this Paladin, and you wrap all that together, now you start having some serious expertise in these little sections. And then when you package that all together, you have a really high quality product, and you're diversifying your supply chain, you're diversifying your capability set here. And hopefully, as each of those companies makes advances in their own respective commercial fields, those advances will then percolate into advances in the defense industry, right? So instead of just looking at one company who has kind of a mile wide and inch deep expertise and trying to build the whole thing, you have really focused experts who are advancing each piece incrementally.
Yeah, I think that's
That's
spot
a
on,
group.
Brand. I think that's kind of hints at the marketplace, right? I think we should think about the marketplace almost as a component technology marketplace rather than end-to-end connect this technology to that one specific solution marketplace.
So to Andrew's question, absolutely. If it weren't, if we didn't shut down the entire state, effectively on March 16th, I would have been in Dallas, twice a month, and Victor would have been helping organize a lot of these events. In the virtual world, we don't really have to be city or market specific, especially whenever the programming is not really specific to a market. It's just the audience that's going to connect to it. So, but we certainly have a commitment to Dallas and bringing that stuff up there because of those things that I said earlier on, which is, that layer of like really awesome defense and aerospace companies up in DFW that gives the DFW ecosystem a flavor that we just don't have here in Austin. So we only have a couple of minutes left. So I'm going to do one parting question for our two speakers who have done a fantastic job. So Cliff, like DIU had a somewhat famous do-over back in 2016, and has since really evolved, and I think has become very has a very good understanding of kind of what their business model is and what they do well and what they, maybe their limitations are. Brance, you noted that AAL is still pretty young. And so you guys have, that you're going to have a lot of growing to do, but have done a lot of growing. So the question is like, what do you guys see next as the evolution? Like, what are the next couple of steps? Where do you see this going? And what are the big changes or discoveries we can expect from you guys over the next, say, 2 to 5 years?
Yeah, from the AAL perspective, and I'll blend maybe a little bit of my personal perspective here in with this. I think really developing our playbook for how we operate, right? I jokingly refer to AAL as the most well-funded startup, and we've assembled a good team here. We've gotten a few good test cases under our belt. I think FAR being one of those. Hopefully Spartan coming up is another good success for us. And so I think developing our playbooks, one for how we engage with the Army, right, and how we go about solving and advancing solutions for our Army customers, and then two, how we engage with the startup ecosystem, and really understanding how can we be a good partner, like continuing to improve on that, right? So whether that's increasing dollar amounts for the contracts that we award, shortening the contract time. A thing I hear about a lot is like breaking down the process for people in industry, right? Making sure that we increase our ability to communicate effectively to our industry partners. And then I think on top of that, looking at it from the startup perspective, or from AAL as a startup perspective, is just increasing our scale, right? So right now we're doing maybe 3 to 7 challenges or problems each year, but increasing that and increasing how far we take those solutions, right? So right now, a lot of the work that we've done has been kind of in that R&D phase, concept to validation phase, but can we continue to drive the ball forward with turning those concepts into solutions that actually get into the hands of soldiers? And from the Army perspective, that's a years-long process, right? And so I think that the early successes that we're showing right now in 1 to 3 to 5 years, do some of those technologies actually make it into the field and make it into programs of record? That's going to be an ongoing target or ongoing goal for us, and I think one that there's no really shortcut around that, but just seeing what we do now, does that translate into success later on?
Mhm.
I love it. Cliff, real quick, I think we're probably butting up against time.
Yeah,
We'll let you close this out.
I think you'll see DIU accelerate the volume of transactions. You know, we've had some good success delivering at scale, and so I think you'll see us continue to more closely align to some of the end user goals to continue to deliver those transactions at scale. I think you'll also see us branch out in a couple different ways with our partner organizations, and so we want to make sure none of us are in competition with each other, and you know, we want to make sure we're being accretive to the overall ecosystem as well. And so I think, you know, to the extent that the lab can help people solve Army problems in a way, I think you'll see DIU partnering with the lab more frequently to, you know, provide that additional funding for topics that we're bullish on that are defined by the end customer.
Fantastic. So that's it. Victor, were you able to get your mic working? No, you were not. So I'll close this out. Thank you, Victor, for putting this together. Thanks to Brian Hiddle, who's somewhere behind the screens, making this happen as well. Thanks to Brantz and Cliff for joining us. And thanks to that Dallas Startup Week audience. And you can reach out to me, Kevin Lantroop at capitalfactory.com. Please reach out to Victor. He can connect us as well. And we'll see you guys again soon.